So now it's broadcasting, and attendance are, we have 11 attendance now, 14 going up. Hello, everyone. We will start at exactly 5 p.m. Stay tuned. So for the meantime, you can go to Menti, www.menti.com, and enter the code 5008149. And you can also use the QR code to get directly to the website just by pointing your mobile camera, and that's it. If you have question, you can use the Q&A, and later, if you want to talk, you can raise your hand so I can allow you to talk. So in just 3 minutes, we will start the presentation.
Let's give a few minutes more, Patrick, because the number of participants keep increasing.
Sure, doctor.
Let's give a few minutes more. Yeah, it's keep increasing. Now we reach 75, and so grade. This is 80 now, 81.
Now you're making me nervous.
I'm just, because it's just only, it's 5 o'clock, so we said let's give a few minutes more, so we can allow the participant, all the participant, to enjoy the presentation. Okay, good.
No, I'm only showing 21, but apparently it's...
No, it's 95 now, 97. We reach 100.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
What do you think, Shireen?
yeah, we can start, Prof. We
Okay,
can start now. Yeah.
Do you have to flip a switch, or?
No, we can, you can start. Just we will tell the participant to go to the Mentimeters, and I think Patrick um, writing that in the chat, so they can use the code, or to go to www.menti.com and to use the code, so they can actively participate in the session. And now it's we can start the it's keep increasing.
Do I need to say that? Do I need to say that about the menti.com?
Yes, why not? Not
Sure.
a problem. And then you can start, Prof. Tom.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. Hello from Abu Dhabi. This is Thomas Hochstettler, and I'm the provost of Abu Dhabi University. First of all, I want to wish everyone a happy new year and hope that everyone is safe wherever you are. To begin with, we're going to have a few little voting exercises during the course of the next hour or so. So if you would like to participate, you should go to www.menti.com and enter the code 5008149. So we're off and running. This week's session is part of the series or modules on the general topic of what will schools look like in the year 2030. Over the last 3 weeks, we've explored several topics on envisioning the schools of the future. We started with vision and leadership for future schools, and then moved on to educating global citizens. Last we had a look at virtual schools in 2030, but today we're going to be pulling it all together with an exercise in imagining how learning will actually happen in the schools of the future. And we're calling this success future classrooms and curricula. Now, just to be clear, I think we're all inevitably shaped in our vision about what the future is going to be like by the most recent past. And for us today, our recent past with stay-at-home learning inevitably is shaping our thinking about what schools will be like in 2030. And I think it's a little bit dangerous to expect the future of education to look too much like it does right now during this global emergency that we're all still living through. So I think we should ask ourselves with a little bit more perspective, will the way we have taught over the course of the last year be determinative in shaping how we continue to teach into the future? Will remote learning and online learning delivery and testing be the wave of the future? And most importantly, how can we use the lessons that the global pandemic has taught us to make education better? And over the course of the next hour or so, I hope that we can explore these and related questions. And I hope that we can all come away with a realistic sense of where we're going as educators of the young. We have the comments on, so I'm going occasionally to be checking comments to see what people are asking. I'm not sure what this means. Is it a translator? I'm not quite sure what that means. Webinar start or not? Yes, the webinar has started. So I think that's where we are. So I'd like to start out by talking about 5 trends that I think are currently impacting education today. And it's important to note that these are not things in the future. These are things that are already happening. They are elements of learning that we all have available to us at the present time. They represent the strides forward in technology, if you will, that we all have experienced as a global society ever since the onset of the information revolution some 30 years ago or even longer ago. So let's look at them one by one. Learning management systems. For anyone who has had the benefit of LMS as a tool for teaching, it is hard to imagine life without it. LMS systems are everywhere now, and new versions of this kind of tool are becoming available just about one every new month. Whereas about 5 years ago, we were limited to using Moodle and Blackboard. There are now new customized curriculum and classroom management systems that are highly customizable and attuned to the needs of teachers and students and administrators alike. Last month, Software Testing Help listed the top 20 LMS systems that are currently available. And Moodle, which is freeware, I believe, is ranked number 6, and Blackboard are ranked number 11 in value, and above them are competitors, some of which I've never heard of before, such as MindFlash, SkyPrep, Nomax, Talent LMS, and Docebo. And the list keeps growing week by week. And what does Blackboard do? Well, Blackboard or Moodle or whatever, Blackboard was the first of these systems, I believe, and it started way back in 1997. So it's been around for about a quarter of a century. And its great strength is it allows teachers and administrators to manage data. It also integrates social media into the classroom. It allows students to talk to each other. It allows students to talk to teachers, teachers to talk to students. It has gamification attributes, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. And it provides branding opportunity for the school and for the students themselves. And we'll be getting into that in a little bit. and it allows for analytics so that what goes on in the classroom is accumulated in a database, and faculty can see what's going on in their classroom and make changes accordingly. The next trend that we see is gamification. Anybody who's got kids starting at about the age of 3 knows what games are and can kind of deduce what gamification is. Gamification is not games, but it is the use of many of the elements of electronic games as a ways to engage learners more effectively in the educational process. And now we're all full participants in interactive social media, where likes and loves and endless other emojis are part of the sense of who we are and how we interact with each other. And this is all part of gamification. And especially in a period of social isolation, the gamification takes on additional meaning and becomes very important. These are simple elements of gaming, but these elements are becoming increasingly a part of the learning environment. Such thing as leaderboards. When you have a piece of software, frequently there's competition involved, and competition becomes then a motivator for the students who are running through the software. There are progress bars, so you can see how are you doing. Are you halfway, 3/4, 7/8 of the way through the process? There are achievement badges. There are avatars, so that students can pick their personality as they're working through the software. Gamification facilitates group formation and teamwork, because in games, I am not a gamer, but I have teenage sons. I've had teenage sons, and I know what it means to be in a gaming field and to be interacting with other people anywhere on the face of the planet as you go through the different levels of a game. So challenges and rewards and recognition and interactions are all made part of the learning software, and makes learning more attractive to people for whom this is part of their life. And the smart people are incorporating elements of this into the teaching software. I'm going to stop occasionally, as I said, and I'm going to look and see what comments. Someone is saying we're suffering from LMS systems that are causing lots of lagging. They are full of bugs. Any advice in this regard? Well, I personally don't have any great advice, except, as I say, there are new elements coming out virtually every week. And the old standbys like Moodle and Blackboard are no longer state of the art. They are always updating, and I can't say anything against them. At the Abu Dhabi University, we use Blackboard, and we've been pretty happy with it. But if you're having bad experience, perhaps you could share that with us. I do not know what the criteria are for ranking the LMS. You might want to go to my source, which is Software Testing Help. And in their volume in November 2020, they listed these LMS systems, and they can tell you pretty well what it is that they were gauging them on. That's a very good question. Is it possible to make this an information database for students and benefit from it for years to come? Well, I think that the best LMS systems really do capture data. I know we store data for at least over the lifetime of the student, because it becomes part of their permanent record. And we are required by law in the UAE to maintain records over the course of time. So yes, I think the answer to that is that we do keep this information as a database for students, and we do benefit it for years to come. And how do we measure the progress if we apply gamification during the lesson? Well, gamification, in my understanding of it and the way I've seen it used, is simply a tool. And we'll talk a little bit about how we are able to measure progress and to assess a student's work through classware and software a little bit later. So let's just keep on moving. Students are not using LMS for their benefits. On the contrary, they're wasting their time creating parallel classes and communicating in unrelated topics. Any advice on how to engage them more in lesson? Well, maybe somebody could write a comment. That's the $64,000 question. How do you get them more engaged in their lesson? That's where good teaching comes in. I mean, that's the very definition of good teaching. Students have always been able to find other things diverting their time, sending notes back and forth in class, looking out the window. An LMS is simply a platform. I don't know how an LMS can create parallel classes. I'll tell you a little bit of an anecdote. At one time, I was on the board of computing in New England, in the United States, and this was about 20 years ago. And we were sitting around. I was on the board of the New England Regional Computing Consortium, and we had the head of the computing department at Dartmouth College, which is a very high-level Ivy League university in the United States. And he was very much against students having access to computers, believe it or not. And I asked him one day, well, why are you so opposed to students using computers to interact with each other? And he says, because all it is one set of hormones talking to another set of hormones. And I think there's a lot of that. Students will talk, students will use social media for their own purposes, and they will use LMS for their own purposes. And I'm not sure that there's anything that we can do against it. What's the best educational platform? I'm not sure that I can, with any justification, say what the best one is. I think you have to look at all the options and pick the one that's best for your institution. One of the great things about Blackboard, and one of the reasons we use it, is because it is an old and stable system. It's not going to crash, or if it does crash, it's very rare, and we're able to recover very quickly. And the other thing is that there are a lot of users. So if people come from other institutions to our institution, they already know about Blackboard. And the same thing is true about Moodle and some of the old standbys. So let's keep going. Some of the other trends in education, primary, secondary, and even in university education is the greater use of virtual reality and augmented reality in the classroom. For young people who are constantly online and accustomed almost nonstop to visual stimulation, we now have the ability to represent virtual reality through teaching software in ways where the quality of the imagery improves literally month by month. Similarly, augmented reality is becoming increasingly used and provides a rich and highly engaging environment for students to learn in. There is a virtual, pardon the pun, virtual explosion of software packages at ever lower costs that can provide teachers with the ability to represent subject matter in virtually any discipline through the medium of virtual and augmented reality. And this can be in almost any field, in engineering, in architecture, in biology. You could travel through the circulatory system in virtual reality, and you can participate and see things in ways that you never could through other kinds of media. One major problem we face is not whether to implement virtual reality and augmented reality in our curricula, but rather the problem of choosing and creating educational content that is most up to date and relevant. And getting a little bit more sophisticated here, robotics and coding is becoming increasingly increasingly a staple part of education in colleges, universities, as well as in high schools, and even in grade schools. I remember my middle son actually had a robotics class in about the 4th grade, and they were building robots then and talking about how robots can take over certain jobs. The ubiquity of robots in our lives and the ever expanding capacity of our creative economy, I think, to use elements of robotic technologies in the workplace are today placing great pressure on schools to teach the elements of robotics and coding. To use robotic technology effectively, students are going to need to learn to code. Just as a generation ago, we had to learn how to use calculators. We had to learn how to do word processing and navigate a spreadsheet. Today, students need to learn a little bit about coding. And in fact, the more coding they know how to do, the better they're going to be. The use of robotics has long been an element, of course, in manufacturing processes. And with the pandemic, the delivery systems that have become far more efficient through the use of robotics has really created a surge in the importance of robotics in the economy, in the retail, wholesale, and anything in the supply chain, anything that needs to be delivered, you're going to increasingly find robotics. So I think that schools that use and teach the basics of robotic technology are already ahead of the game in preparing students for the lives that they will be living 5 and certainly 10 years from now. So to sum it all up, all of the elements that we just reviewed are becoming part of the smart classroom. To review real quickly, LMS, learning management systems, gamification, virtual and augmented reality, coding and robotics. These are already today the essential elements of the smart classroom. And in this environment, not only are teachers able to monitor and respond to the learning going on, student by student in the classroom, but students are connected to the teacher and to each other in ways that are totally familiar to them, through texting of questions and providing instructions, providing feedback, clarifications, sending documents to each other with comments and strings of comments, submitting quiz answers and homework assignments, all through the medium of the internet. And this is part of life today. So looking around the globe, I don't know if we have anyone from Finland here, but I think the Finns have kind of been out in front in terms of creating learning spaces, the physical space of the school of the future. Finland is already investing very heavily in the architectural elements that support these trends in learning technologies. Teachers can configure the spaces that they use. Look how open these spaces are for large presentations for the entire school population, down to intimate settings where 1 or 2 students can receive specialized attention in a warm and non-threatening environment. But regardless of the configuration, teachers have access to the electronic media and to task-specific software that optimizes the students' learning experience and their chances for success. So I have a little bit of a video, which it's now several years old, but I think it shows extremely well what we're looking at in terms of what a school is going to look like. Here, they're guessing in the year 2050.
In the year 2050, continued advancements in technology and in the global experiences of a generation of digital natives will put specialized and customized education within the reach of many more individuals around the world. Therefore, any vision of the learning environments of the future must take information and communication technology, or ICT, into account to some degree, considering the way that people make sense of an always connected, digitalized, networked, and information-based world. In such an information-based world, creativity, or the ability to do different and unique things with the same information will be essential. A learner's capacity for creativity will be central to remaining economically competitive in this new globally connected society, equally or perhaps even more important than traditional resources of land, tools, and labor skills in determining standard of living. Learners of 2050, having grown up in a time when being a digital native is no longer particularly unique, will have an expectation of personalized, customized experiences in all aspects of life, and education will be no different. Technology will have expanded learners' capabilities for social knowledge creation, collaboration, sharing, and mastery. Creativity will sit at the core of this collaborative learning framework. Collaborative learning will benefit economic, cultural, racial, and religious diversity, inspiring new and creative forms of knowledge creation. Collaborative learning will therefore be more important than ever, as UN projections could see up to 70 million people migrating from poor to rich countries by 2050, bringing with them a host of diverse learning needs and social traditions, and the global economic balance will have shifted to Pacific Rim nations who will sit at the vanguard of technology innovation. This global demographic evolution and diversity will demand a more flexible and individualized model of education. The individuals who will drive this shift towards personalized learning will themselves be inherently creative, employing innovative and improvisational approaches towards education that will challenge existing institutional structures. Creative learning is more efficiently achieved by a collective effort than by an individual one, as learners will build on each other's ideas to jointly construct and share new ways of understanding and manipulating information to achieve greater and more meaningful knowledge gains and insights. This will require a new model of learning that shifts from the one-directional, one-teacher-to-many students classroom of the past to studio and virtual group learning environments with teachers acting as facilitators or mentors. These new learning environments will employ a host of technologies to facilitate creativity and collaboration, such as video conferencing, telepresence, and holographic conferencing, allowing learners to virtually gather in a single physical place despite actually being in different physical locations, and immersive interactive environments, virtual worlds, and massively multiplayer online games, which will provide goal-oriented collaborative contexts for learning. They will feature tangible computing through the use of intelligent objects, surfaces, and locales which react to user presence. Indeed, these learning environments will not necessarily be tethered to physical brick-and-mortar locations. Instead, learners will use mobile location-aware technology to interact with smart objects and smart environments in the real world, creating a different kind of immersive learning that appeals to a sense of adventure and investigative inquiry. The use of these technologies, in which the students of the future will already be well-versed, will serve to powerfully increase student engagement. Learners in this new model of education will be simultaneously producers and consumers, or prosumers, of information, who guide their own personalized learning by identifying, creating, and drawing on resources that meet their needs. All learners and teachers will therefore need a new set of skills to find and manage information and to efficiently and critically use technology to achieve their individual objectives. Hand in hand with the need for new skills, learners and educators will have to creatively reframe how traditional concepts of knowledge authorship and ownership fit in the context of this new social remix culture. The prosumer learners of 2050 will work within an intensified cycle of collaborative and creative production and consumption that will have serious and previously unseen ethical implications regarding fair use, intellectual property, and copyright. As learning environments embrace the move towards collaboration, creativity, and personalization, they will require new forms of individualized assessment, which will be based largely on portfolios of achievement and project-based work. E-portfolios will not merely be virtual archives for showcasing work, but will themselves be interactive, dynamic, public, and socially accessible learning spaces, where learners will demonstrate diverse learning gains in one central place. The traditional approach to assessment, focusing on facts, memorization, and test-taking, does not foster development of creativity and innovation, and will not be relevant to the creative learner. Skepticism about the future of education in a technology-rich society is fairly warranted, as technology has often been used to merely digitize traditional models of learning. In addition, learning institutions have traditionally been slow to adopt change, which is out of step with the rapid change in learning made possible by collaborative technology. However, the future of education will depend on far more than simply the integration of ubiquitous technology, factoring in as well trends towards globalization and social, economic, and cultural diversity, trends that will not simply benefit from, but will demand a shift towards individualized learning programs within collaborative, creative environments.
Hi, doctor. You can close that by pressing the close on the upper. Yep.
Okay, thank you. I was a little bit hung up there. Well, the time has come for us to have our first little voting session. I hope you learned something from this video. I found it extremely stimulating to see what kinds of things people are looking at in terms of future schools. The first question that I'd like us to do, oh, you're already there. What trending technologies have you used in your classroom? Mark all that you use. Well, that's interesting. Just about the largest number, the largest percentages obviously are using smart classroom technology, and smart boards. That's great. And followed not too far behind by LMS technology. Well, I'm very impressed. It appears that our users in our session today are fairly far advanced. If nearly a third of you are already using whiteboards and similar kinds of technology in your classroom. Well, I think we've kind of reached stasis here, so I'm going to proceed on. I think this is very telling. Virtual and augmented reality is probably among the less used of the technologies that are moving into the classroom. But I'm not. I am a little bit surprised that coding and robotics actually garner about a 10% utilization in this group this evening. So I think that's very telling that these things are already making their way into the classroom. I have another question, so I think we'll just move on to that. Namely, how good do you think you are in using this technology? How do you rate your overall competency in the use of classroom technology? The problem with this kind of a workshop is that we can't talk to each other. I'm getting all kinds of questions coming into my head about why. It's one thing to say I'm pretty good, I'm not very good, but what I'd like to know is why do you think that? And share our thoughts. So these are the limitations of this kind of technology. Well, I think a pattern is emerging. The vast majority of our participants today, I think they are pretty good or very good at using classroom technology. So I think that's a very good sign. I'm not sure where I would put myself in this in this group, but I think it's an interesting opportunity maybe to stop and think, oh, geez, how good am I? And what do I have yet to learn? And how do I go about that? And how do I get my administrators to provide the kind of training that I need in order to do my job the best? I'm going to take my prerogative and look at the comments, which we've had 4 comments come in. I don't think the rankings are going to change that much if we go ahead. So with your kind permission, share more light on gamification. Well, I think probably the best thing to do would be to look it up. Because I am not a practitioner, I'm an administrator, and I learned by observation, and I've learned by doing some background reading, quite a bit of background reading. What I will say is that this is the gamification and the elements of gamification, the use of avatars, the use of leaderboards, the use of motivating tools and things like that, are things that young people know how to use. If anything, the first thing you want to do, obviously, and you all know this, is to get the student in the door, to get them in the game, as it were, to start taking seriously the software that we put in front of them or give them to start to master the serious content. So I think the best thing I could do, because we're almost halfway through our presentation this evening and I've got so much more to do, is to refer you, just Google gamification. I think you will find a vast amount of information on what gamification is and how people are using it in the classroom. All of these are nice ideas, but the real challenge here is the implementation, as it needs a big financial budget. Well, that's an excellent point. And I'm an administrator, and so I'm always pinching pennies on behalf of my university, and I have to prove that something is really going to add value or I'm not allowed to buy it. But one of the things that is great about the technology revolution is that technology is becoming cheaper by the day, and the cost of things is continuously dropping. There are a lot of things. I believe Moodle is free of charge. So if you need an open access, open codes system, Moodle would do you very well. Some of the other things, the hardware, you know, that video that we just saw, that hardware, I don't even believe that hardware exists yet. But the price of hardware, the price of laptops, the price of iPads is constantly falling. You don't have to have the best and you don't have to have the latest. So my advice would be to stay behind the cutting edge and at least behind the bleeding edge, and buy very good equipment that has a good reputation and a record of being robust, because kids are hard on things, and making sure that the investments that you make last for a while is going to make it easier to convince the authorities, the people in charge of the purse strings, that it's worth the price. So how to make parents aware of the requirements of blindness of learning? I'm not sure I quite understand that question. And perhaps you could rephrase it, because I'm sorry, but I simply don't quite understand. Are we talking about a person of determination who's blind, or some other element of learning that might be called blind? If you could re-ask the question, I would appreciate it. So most school curriculum does not have special dedicated course subjects or teaching learning methods on robotics or research-oriented study. Can you suggest ideas on change or initiation? Well, I think that if you make whoever's in charge of your school aware of what's going on, and do a little bit more research yourself, as I have done for this presentation, there are resources that can point the way toward why robotics and the kind of technologies, virtual reality and augmented virtual reality are important, important tools, important part of the toolkit of teachers today. So I'm not sure I can say anything more than that, except that find a good model, find a good institution, somebody, someplace, some school that does this well, and make your administrator jealous. Make them realize that other schools are leapfrogging ahead of you, and that some elements need to be made available, otherwise they're going to fall behind. Good partners, they're in the communities, there are people, there are companies, there are organizations that are very eager, at least where I live, to help fund these kinds of initiatives. They're not terribly expensive. And the hardest part, I think, is learning how to use them. So that if you as a teacher get up to speed, then I think it'll be a lot easier for you to convince your fellows of the importance of using these new kinds of technologies. We say competent in technology use, since we're using technology based on our context of optimum way, the highest efficiency. Yes. And I'm going to have a little bit more to say about that in a little bit, because if we assess ourselves on how good we are at the use of technology, that doesn't necessarily mean that we are better teachers. It doesn't even mean we're more efficient as teachers. I fully agree with that. And I think this is a part question. What are the rubrics to differentiate? Again, if you could rephrase that, I might be able to answer it a little bit more coherently. I think the question of the quality of learning by each student should also be given attention, more than just the use of the latest technology. Bravo for this question. It's the quality of the learning. Is it the content? Does the student really know what they're being taught? And I'll be getting a little bit into that as well. The latest technology may mean that we just bought the latest toy. I was talking with a colleague this afternoon, and we were saying that that sometimes technology is a solution in search of a problem, and sometimes technology just doesn't suit. And having the latest technology means that we have the latest thing that doesn't suit sometimes. So let the solution fit the problem. If you're not having a problem, then you can wait. It's not necessarily not necessary to be the front of the pack all of the time. So this is a great question. Quality, and how do we make sure that we are in fact delivering quality product? Smart future schools or smart schools of the future. This is another way of asking that same question. A smart future school. what exactly does it mean? I mean, are we in the future yet? Yes, we already are. And a lot of schools, like the Finns that we just saw, I think they're living in the future, but they're also in the here and now. They're not using technology that hasn't yet been invented. They're using what's available to them now, and they're also probably driving forward in the use of existing technology. And there's no reason not to be using the things that you already have at hand. So let's see. I think the question of quality of learning. Oh, I thought we just had that question. Sorry. So I think we've answered those questions. Am I muted? I don't believe I'm muted. Patrick, am I muted?
No, no, Professor. We can hear you
Okay.
Hear you well.
Good, thank you. So how do I move on beyond our last little quiz? I don't want to close. I need some technical help here.
It's not moving, doctor. Can you press the right arrow key on your keyboard?
That's not it.
Okay, then present again.
Sorry.
Then present again, Professor. Then press the arrow key to go to the next slide.
Okay.
Oh.
Operator error. Okay, we're back on track. Now that we've had an opportunity to look at some of the technologies that are making their way into the classroom, we can turn our attention to some of those, maybe these qualitative factors as to whether or not all of that technology can in fact improve the student's learning experience. And as we do so, we'll have an opportunity kind of to examine the effectiveness and the efficiency of technology as it makes its way into our lives. So diverse time and place. Students will have more opportunities to learn at different times and in different places. And e-learning tools will facilitate the opportunities for remote self-paced learning. So we have to ask ourselves, what's a school for? And students, they can learn anywhere and any time and any place. Over the course of the last 9 months, we've all kind of lived through this. The fact that most students have been at home, commuting electronically, virtually to the classroom, are already doing this. But what do we make of scheduling? What do you do? I mean, in the old days, a bell rang at the beginning of the school day. In most schools, it still does, and at regular intervals during the course of the day. And well, what does the sense of that anymore if students are constantly going to be moving at their own pace? There's not going to be a mathematics class and then a history class and then a science class, chemistry, whatever. But all of these things are going to begin to meld together. So what are the structures that we put in place in order for school still to be a meaningful experience? While some schools still do, of course, rely on bells to make sure that students are inside and in their classroom, I think we can expect that over time, the school day will become much more fluid, much less regimented over time, and will bleed into the free time of students as they begin to move into what I would call a more holistic learning pattern. So diversity in the time and place where learning happens. It's already happening. I think we know that moving out of the school into into the workplace, people are working longer hours now during the pandemic. There's no downtime. There's no opportunity to stop and shift, to take a break, to have lunch. Everything is happening all the time because information is available to us all the time. Communication is ubiquitous, and people can be contacted day or night at any time and under any circumstances. It's a different world. Personalized learning. Students will be learning with study tools that adapt to their capabilities, so that students who are more average and might be challenged with harder tasks, and they will not be able to move forward until that certain level is achieved. Students who experience difficulties with the subject will get the opportunity to practice more until they reach the required level. And students will be positively reinforced. This is the gamification of learning, and this kind of positive reinforcement and the motivation to do better and to improve the level of success during their individual learning processes that will become increasingly a part of the learning environment. Furthermore, teachers will be able to see clearly which students need help and in which specific areas. So here we're addressing the level of learning and achievement, but we're not really addressing the question of content, and this goes back to our participant who asked the quality question just a few minutes ago. So what can we learn also from educational psychologists about human motivation? Do the gamification elements we just looked at provide us with an answer toward the maturation of the human mind and what works in some settings and doesn't work in other settings? Ultimately, we want students to learn for the sheer joy of learning, but that does not come early to students, nor does it come at the same time for each student. So who decides what is sufficient for a student to, quote, pass from one level, from the 4th grade to the 5th grade, or from the 5th to the 6th, and so on through their career? What is passing anyway? We don't have GPAs. Will we have grades in the future? Will we have a way of kind of averaging out so that the student will be measured up against other students and be allowed to move on? What are grade levels in this fluid new environment? These are questions that we as teachers and as administrators are already having to answer for our schools. And we also have to define what is positive reinforcement. Is praise positive reinforcement? What are the reward system in this brave new world of electronic learning? And how do we keep from creating an educational assembly line that simply moves the student through at their own pace? The old assembly lines, the assembly line moved at a very steady pace, and it didn't change. Now we're simply talking about every student will have their own assembly line, and they will be learning at their own rate. So how do we truly allow for the greatest opportunity for human growth and for the shedding of old assumptions and the exploration of new ones as schools go through this transformation from the old face-to-face model to whatever it is that we're moving into? And then we also have the problem of free choice. And every subject that is taught aims for the same destination. That is the road that leads toward a destination that varies with each student. As in personalized learning, students themselves will be modifying their learning processes with the tools that they feel are necessary for them. Students are going to have a lot more opportunity to choose how they learn. And this creates its own problems. How much freedom is too much? Where does a teacher intervene? And how does a teacher intervene? Left to their own devices, I suspect that most students would choose the most entertaining ways to do their homework, their schoolwork, and to optimize their enjoyment rather than to double down on those areas that really need attention. So I think we're You know, that wonderful finished school that we just saw a few minutes ago, that wide open environment. How do you make sure that the students are making good choices in that environment, and that the choices that they're making are actually going to lead them to greater understanding? We're also looking at more project-based learning. As careers are adapting to what some are calling the freelance economy of the future, where jobs are not quite so institutionalized, where people will be working more fluidly, not perhaps have one employer, maybe have multiple employers, or be moving from career to career over the course of a 30 or 40-year career. Students today will have to adapt to project-based learning and working. Rather than having a job description, they will be given a task, something to create, something to make happen. This means that they necessarily will be applying their skills to problems in a shorter time frame, both as individuals and working in groups. So they need to become acquainted with project-based learning in high school, where organizational and collaborative and time management skills can be taught, in addition to the content-based systems that we currently have in place. I think one answer to how we teach project-based learning is that one of the things we need to figure out is how to pace it at the student's mastery of material and level of accomplishment. Instead of filling in an answer sheet or writing a lab report, the student can use program learning software to work through a project, and the teacher can assess the student's progress as they go along and their shortcomings as the project evolves, making sure that the student masters all of the elements of the project before moving ahead. This new kind of learning environment makes it possible for the teacher constantly to be assessing how the student is doing because of the work that shows up as the project is being developed. So they need to make sure that the student is going back and correcting missteps and mastering concepts and techniques and factual content continuously, so that every project will be a successful project. Project-based learning and working means that there are no failed projects. The students are mentored along so that ultimately they have a successful outcome. We're gathering quite a few comments, and I'm going to stop in a few minutes to read them. Field experience is something, because we have more time, theoretically, that technology is going to make the kind of nuts and bolts of teaching more efficient, then theoretically there should be more time for having field trips. Something that we all experienced when we were younger, and getting out into the real world and taking active participation in real world kinds of activities. Many educators anticipate that with a flipped classroom, and we're going to be talking about that in a few minutes, time in school can be far more efficiently spent on other things. And among the most important of these would be time spent not in the school, but rather outside, observing actual phenomena in real time. And then finally, data interpretation. In the old days, I think teachers marked papers, some of us still do. We correct grammar in the margins of a student's essay. We look over the worksheets of problem sets and mathematics and lab projects in school. Sciences. But today, software solutions are already doing a lot of that for us, the grading and the correcting of errors, from spell checking to Grammarly, from step-by-step analysis of math problems as students are working through them on a computer, to assessing the quality of responses on a chemistry lab assignment, for example. And the software prompts the students to do a redo until they figure out the right pathway to the correct answer. So as everyone within our society today is becoming increasingly dependent on these tools for getting the right answer, interpretive skills need to be even more developed so that learning does not simply become an exercise of outsmarting the software. And then finally, we get to the point where, of course, mentoring is going to become increasingly important. As students become more independent, their need for guidance about what matters in the educational process, things like values, integrity, good team playing, mutual respect, as well as sense of the value of learning for its own sake. These things are going to become increasingly the job of the teacher, whether in a physical or in a virtual classroom. I'm going to pause here and look at some of the comments. It says I'm muted. Am I still muted?
No, Professor, we can hear you well.
Okay.
Prof. Tom.
All right. But they say they're not able to hear me, so I'm not quite sure.
There is some lag, but it's not that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not that.
Okay, thank you. Question, maybe it provides me with surveys about students' progress. I'm assuming that means the system, the learning management system, in the subject and their weaknesses, so the assessments can shed light on the extent to which educational outcomes and goals are achieved. Right on target. And the great thing about these assessment tools is you don't need to wait. I'll talk about this in a minute. You don't need to wait until the end of the semester. You don't need to wait until the end of the week. You can do it literally day by day. So that one of the great pain, the great agonies of being a teacher when I first started out was not realizing that a student was struggling. I'm sure everyone on this workshop has had that experience, but with the assessment tools available to us today, that's becoming increasingly less prevalent. So what are the important criteria that must be followed for managing time inside the classroom? Well, I think that as students become more independent, I think that the question, I would turn it around and say, how do you teach students to be more efficient in their management of time? And this is basically one of the life skills that we're teaching as time goes on. So I'm not sure, I think because the fluidity of the system, of the environment as it is evolving, because it is more fluid, then managing time is going to be far more personalized for different students or groups of students who will be moving more rapidly or more slowly through the content. But this is nothing new. We always have had students who could work faster and some who couldn't quite master the material fast enough. So this is not so much a new thing as it is a new environment in which an old problem is occurring. That's not a very good answer, but it's my thought on the topic. How will we be able to educate students with special needs using these technologies? What about our special students? What will be the future school for them? I cannot imagine a better opportunity to use technologies than with students of determination who need special care. I think that, again, I think I would point you to the internet, to Google or to another browser, whatever search engine you use, to look for software, because I'm sure that software is being developed with the particular needs and the particular characteristics of the students who have special needs. And that's what I think I would do. It would be the place that I would start. Do you think it will be suitable for students in all cultures? Do not think that the Gulf area students are more dependent and that this might not fit. I think that there are elements of students, the students that I've worked with and taught in the Gulf, I think that they're very attuned to these kinds of, this kind of way of doing business. And in my experience, Gulf students are really quite self-confident, but they need to be brought out of their shells sometimes and shown what they're capable of. The motivational tools that we've been talking about, the reward systems, the reward for doing things independently and for thinking on their own. I think that these tools are absolutely well suited for students in this part of the world. And I would be interested to talk about it if you want to get in touch with me. I think it's a very interesting question. Our university is probably 70% students from the GCC. Half of our students come from the Emirates, and they're all doing fairly well in this kind of environment. So I have some empirical evidence that suggests that they are doing well. I think I can relate these strategies to the International Baccalaureate system. Absolutely. The IB system is for students who are perhaps slightly more motivated, but I think that these strategies would absolutely shine in that kind of environment. And again, I would be very interested to hear your experience and how you've been experiencing the technology in the classroom. We have to remember that context is very significant when it comes to education and learning. Isn't that true? Don't you think most schools are too slow to substantially enhance or reinvent education and learning? Well, I think educators tend to be a little bit stodgy and a little bit slow to move forward with new technologies. But I'll tell you, all it takes is one champion. If you can get one person, and maybe you're that person, who understands the potential of technology to improve quality learning, then it becomes, I think it becomes infectious. There are those who will fight against it. There are people, I'm a historian, and there are still historians who use typewriters. I'm tempted to say still use quill pens. I don't think I know anybody who still uses a quill pen. I do have one friend who still uses a typewriter. But I think sooner or later, people will learn in the educational industry, and we are an industry, that they have to keep up, or we will not be graduating students who will be prepared to enter into the workforce and have meaningful and successful lives. Why is so much stress on the job and less on happiness and personality? Well, I agree with that as well. And I come from a culture that, I'm from the United States, and we keep students as adolescents until they get through college, which means 21. And then we expect them to go to graduate school, and then they get a job. And that's kind of the pattern for the educated professional in the United States. And I think that we do have in our culture a sense of the importance of happiness and becoming a whole personality. And by happiness, I mean exploring different ways of knowing, exploring different disciplines, not necessarily focusing early on that job that you want to get. I think that the reason it's important not to stress that first job is that the one that they're going to get when they enter college, let's say, or university at the age of 17 or 18, the job that they're going to have when they're 23 or 24 probably doesn't exist yet. So that they probably need to develop other kinds of skills and develop interpersonal relationships and explore different knowledge traditions and different cultures in order for them to be truly happy and actually to be more successful in the job when they finally get it. Teachers need professional training based on innovation from qualified, future-oriented educational professionals. Well, I think that's true. I was just speaking a moment ago about champions, and champions can be great teachers of their colleagues, and that's one way to do it. Otherwise, you can hire people. There are companies that will train. At our university, we're currently using LinkedIn Learning. LinkedIn Learning is a branch of LinkedIn, you know, the very popular professionals web network. And there are literally thousands of courses that you can take on LinkedIn Learning. And they're very cost effective. In fact, I think many of them are even free. And there's a great deal that you can learn from educational professionals who post their content, their lectures, their how-to kind of presentations on LinkedIn. So I think that there are ways that that can be made to happen. Given all the drivers and emergent experiences, don't you think we need to substantially de-learn the current way we are delivering education and designing learning experiences? Well, that's really fascinating. That sounds like a total topic for another workshop, de-learning the current way we're delivering education. I'm not sure that I would de-learn everything. I think there are quite a few things that we're doing pretty well. I think that we may want to break down the institutional constraints that hem us in, that don't allow us to take advantage of innovation and technology in the classroom. But de-learning, I love that concept. And I'd love to hear from you, because I think that the answer is in there. I think you think we do need to de-learn the current way we're delivering education and designing learning experiences. We need to learn new things. Whether we need to unlearn or de-learn the old ways is perhaps another matter. How about hacking tests and about cheating on them? Yes, well, academic integrity, I'm not sure that I have an answer to that. I think ultimately our best defense against cheating is to instill in the students a sense of responsibility toward each other and a sense of integrity that the practices of trying to get the answers early, or having somebody else take the test for you, or you know, using your iPad or your iPhone to Google the answer while you're sitting in a test. Shame is a wonderful tool in getting students to stop doing that kind of thing. And the invigilation software that has been invented can never fully eradicate cheating. It's going to happen. It happens in every culture. So I'm not sure I have any real answer for that, except to let the students know that it matters to you personally and professionally, that that they have violated, if they do, that they have violated the rules of honesty and honor that, quite frankly, have to predominate in a learning environment. My concern with some schools or universities are just using technology to boost their branding and less focus on enhancing the learning experience. Well, that may be true. And many universities, there are, you know, online universities that have created quite a reputation for themselves simply because of the online learning that goes on. And I share your concern. But the really good schools, the schools that care about quality learning, are going to use the technology and not use it as a flag to raise over their masthead. I think I'm going to stop questions for a few minutes. These are all really fantastic questions. We could use up the rest of their time, but I've got a few other things I want to say. Teachers will really need to move to the side to be facilitators. Yes, I totally agree. One of the challenges is to get teachers to stop holding kids back or pushing too fast. That is very well said. And I congratulate whoever posted this, figuring out what the right steps are, figuring out how much is enough, but not too much. But that's the way it always is, technology or not. I think it's very important that we all need to be attuned to every one of our students and how they're doing. So I'm going to stop answering questions just for a minute, because I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about, and I've lost my notes here, about what it's going to be like in the future if we don't have any more lectures, if we have no imposed curriculum. So the schools become social environments and learning environments and learning networks, that innovation, not only technological, but also social and pedagogical, is already transforming classrooms into meeting rooms. And how curricula are becoming more individualized and reflecting each student's needs, personalized, tailored for their particular needs. We are no longer in the position where we can have a one-size-fits-all. So I think it's very important for us to realize that we are in a brave new world. Getting my notes back here so I can see what I'm talking about. I think another way to frame this question is to ask ourselves whether we are in the middle of evolutionary change or revolutionary change with regard to education. Let's face it, schools have been around for a very, very long time. And there have been many opportunities for societies to embrace new ways of educating over the course of human history. I told you I'm a historian, so I think back a long ways. And if you look back at the 4th century before the current era, the great Greek philosopher Plato founded his academy in Athens, founding at the same time a method of teaching that involved conversation. It involved discourse between the master teacher and the students, and close personal involvement of the teacher in the learning of the student. And a focus in those times was on dialogue, not on the delivery of facts and theory by the teacher, but on mutual discovery between the more experienced teacher, who served more as a pilot for the student than as a source for truth. So in many ways, the schools that we're envisioning for the future, a place for communication, collaborative learning, individualized, tailored instruction, has always been with us in one form or another. And that their best teachers have always been facilitators or learning facilitators of learning rather than guardians or sources of facts and figures. And schools inevitably are places where socialization skills develop, where play and teamwork are part of daily life, and where lessons of leadership and of followership are learned every day. So the question is, are we on a continuum where the best practices of many centuries of good teaching are to be enhanced by the technology that is now around us? Or are we on the brink of a revolution where education, as we have known it and experienced it, will be swept away and replaced by a totally new paradigm, driven by automation and an irreversible drive toward computerized learning? So I think I've got another question for you here. After the pandemic, which of the following do you think will characterize the learning environment at your school? And I'll read these out. Full-time face-to-face instruction with some technological resources used from time to time. Full face-to-face instruction with a great deal more diversity in learning methods enabled by technology. The third is hybrid, but full-time face-to-face learning with greater autonomy for students to learn at their own pace, enabled by technology. Or fourth, remote learning for at least some days each week with substantially greater autonomy for students to learn at their own pace, enabled by technology. This is interesting, hybrid. I would really love to know where you're from. Well, I think the runaway leader is the hybrid but full-time face-to-face learning. That's very interesting. Well, I think we've got our answer. It's a nice bell curve, and with skewing a little bit to the right. So what I think I see here is that everyone understands that technology is going to be a part of our lives forevermore, and that one way or another, technology is going to be enabling the solutions that lie before us. We're running close to out of time. I only have about 10 minutes, and I have a few more points that I would really like to make. So I'm going to close this down. Thank you all for participating. I want to talk very briefly, if I can, about the curriculum of 2030. And I have 2 slides on being down learning. And we're now living in an age where information is ubiquitous. I think we all know that. And although we still assign textbooks, and we expect students to learn often by rote facts and figures and formulas and historical personalities, dates, literary plots, tables, equations. In point of fact, students can readily get all of that information and much more instantaneously through their web browser. So information is everywhere. And yet many of us in education continue to treat the classroom as the principal, and in some cases, the only place where students get information. And many teachers still think that they are and that they should be the main gateway to that information. So I come to the issue or the concept of the flipped classroom. And the flipped classroom is nothing new. Alison King, way back in 1993, published From Sage on the Stage to Guide by the Side, in which she focused on using time with students as the opportunity to show the meaning of information instead of the classroom being a place where information is simply communicated. Alison King was the prophet of the flipped classroom, and her work frequently serves as a point of departure for analysts of trends of education over the last 30 years. The Harvard professor Eric Mazur played a significant role in the concept of the flipped classroom through the development of an instructional strategy that he called peer instruction. And in 1997, he published a book entitled Peer Instruction, a user's manual. He found that his approach, which moved information transfer out of the classroom and information assimilation into the classroom, allowed him to coach students in their learning instead of simply lecturing. So I have a video that I think explains better than most what a flipped classroom is, in case you've never encountered it. And here it is.
The staffers at Woodland Park High School are getting attention worldwide for not giving out homework. Instead, the students watch recorded lectures at home and then do the corresponding homework during their regular class time. 11 News reporter Rosie Barisi is live tonight in Woodland Park. And Rosie, how do the students like it?
Well, Don, they love it. According to teachers and educators from as far as Japan have been calling the school asking where they came up with this brilliant idea. 2 teachers at the school say they stumbled on it on accident.
Those are mole-to-mole ratios.
The only homework these Woodland Park High School students ever really get is to watch TV.
Kids learn with a screen. I'm an old guy. You know, I like
I like a book. I read a book this weekend. It was like with paper, you know, but these kids, they read with things like, you know, they look at screens.
Jonathan Bergman and Aaron Sams decided it would be a good idea to record their lectures live.
We discovered this software.
It was intended for students who couldn't make it to class.
Wow, this is an amazing teaching tool.
And that's when their wheels started turning.
What if we did that all the time?
And now they do.
Instead of sitting and wasting 45 minutes listening to a teacher yap, they're going to have more time to work one-on-one with the teacher, work through problems, do a lot more hands-on activities, a lot more lab activities.
Allowing students to do the brunt of their work in class has worked wonders for their students.
They used to go home and they would get stuck. They would call their friend, which is okay. They would cheat or they would just give up on it.
Student scores have shot up this year, leading teachers to believe this is the way of the future.
It's going to happen. I think it's a matter of time. This is going to take off.
Kids can watch lectures on their iPods, cell phones, and the internet, but since not all kids have access to all those things, teachers can burn their lectures onto DVD, and so far they say that's worked for all the students at the high school. Don?
And we didn't even have DVDs when I was in high school. Rosie, thanks very much. The staffers at Woodland Park High School are getting attention
Okay, I'm gonna need some help getting out of this, Patrick, again.
Just press escape, doctor. Yep. Then close from the, yep.
Okay. Okay, so the flipped classroom, I'm going to ask how many of you do teach in the manner of the flipped classroom. I think it's interesting that that clip was from Woodland Park in Colorado, and the date of the video, which talks about this new system, was 2007. So the flipped classroom is something which is at least 13, probably 14 or 15 years old. And I think it's telling because the flipped classroom is being treated as something which is really brand new. And it's not really all that new. My first take on the flipped classroom was that it was very much the way I went through high school and college, where you did homework, you came to school and turned it in, and then class time was used to expand on what you had learned doing your homework. And we did this by working problem sets or that were like our homework, but it was a little bit harder. We did it through the teacher raising new ideas or expanding on the ones we'd encountered on our own when we were doing our homework. So what's new about today's flipped classroom is one thing and one thing only: technology. The teachers discovered some new software in this clip that has allowed them to tape their lectures so that the students could master the material at home on their own, more or less, and discuss with their friends, and then come to school for an extension of the learning that they had done on their own. And it's not a bad thing, but I have to say, I don't really think it's entirely new, except for the fact that the testing or the technology is new. Now, in different cultures in different parts of the world, the ways the teachers find out what their students have learned vary in many ways. In some countries, there are year-end examinations, and in other ones, there's only the big school leaving exam. In the UK, they have the General Certificate of Education exam, and in Germany, they have the Abitur. And in both of these cases, and the systems that follow them, the level of success is all important in determining where the student gets into university and at what level they can study. And in other cultures, grades and cumulative grade point averages perform a similar function, but on a continuing basis with periodic assessment. So what we're seeing now is the emergence of what might be termed continuous assessment, where every student's monthly, weekly, even daily mastery of material can be gauged and accurately gauged. And with this continuous assessment comes the ability for teachers to guide the student to the resources, to the extra assignments, where they can encounter the material and the practice for them to overcome any weaknesses that they might have. So with the advent of tools for teachers to use in evaluating whether students are learning what is expected, suddenly the world of highly personalized education opens up before us. I'm going to go through these slides very quickly. But we need to be thinking about what are the future subjects that students are going to be learning. And here we are going to have to think about digital literacy. And what is digital literacy actually? Well, it is more than just knowing how to use the internet. As everything becomes presence on the World Wide Web in the Internet of Things, IoT, which is a thing, all of a sudden we need more than ever to teach discernment, to educate about context and motive and persuasion and the psychology of media manipulation. A generation ago, the Canadian scholar Marshall McLuhan coined the phrase, "The medium is the message," by which he meant that how we gather information and disseminate it is more important than the information itself. And this is true in terms of the credibility of information that we get today and how we use it. So McLuhan was the first to use the term the global village. He coined the term World Wide Web, even 10 years or 30 years, 20, 30 years before it was even invented. But what's important is that we begin to think about how we gather information and how we use it, because these things are going to affect the way in which teaching and learning occur in the future. So one very brief note about phenomenon-based learning, which is the creation of thematic schools, the most important ones of which I currently know are those that focus on environmental issues, environmental climate change, and there are others as well. But the interdisciplinarity of such schools is something that is becoming increasingly important within the education environment. So very quickly, those of you who are still here, because I'm sure we're out of time, if you could just give me an idea of which of these strategies you're now using in your classroom teaching and mark all of the ones that you use. It could be more than one. Is anybody still here? Okay. Very interesting. Very interesting. Digital testing. So people are choosing more than one. So it's good to see that there is a general use of these technologies and these methods. I'm very pleased to see that the flipped classroom has a high participation rate from our class this evening. Oh, this is terrific. Our time is up, and I'm going to skip way past. I've got another 10 slides to show you. I very much regret that I'm not going to be able to share those thoughts with you. But I think we've covered a great deal of ground tonight.
You can click on the arrow, Doctor.
Okay.
Going to the next slide, yes.
So I'm going to go to my last slide. Or actually, here's another little quiz question that I'd like you to answer and prognosticate forward to the year 2030. And I have several categories here. And they're not all that different from each other, but there's a slight difference: a facilitator of learning, an information moderator, a process organizer, an arbiter of quality. There's that quality question again: a guide by the side, a mentor, a facilitator of learning. I like this. Wonderful. Well, my only regret is that I can't see you face to face, and we can't have a dialogue, a platonic dialogue about the future of education. I'm going to go to my last slide here. Very, very straightforward conclusions. Technology is every bit as important today in our lives in universities and colleges and high schools and primary schools as it has ever been, and it's going to become increasingly important. And the diversity of tools for teachers is simply going to expand exponentially over the course of the next 10 years. Secondly, teachers will need to be renewing continuously their mastery of technological resources just to remain current. If you think about it, those of you who have children, children at the age of 2 and 3 are already being introduced to technology and how you get information and how you use it. They're already, little kids have cell phones and are texting back and forth already. They know how to do that. This is their world, and it's also our world, and we're going to have to learn how to use it. I discover from I have 3 kids, and I'm always one generation behind. I'm using Instagram and they're using TikTok. When they were using Instagram, I was using Tweet, and they always tell me you're too far behind, and some new elements, some new freedom comes to them through the use of a new technology, and that's our life, and that's the way it's going to be, and it's going to only accelerate. But I still come down to the quality issue that education is still a matter of mind to mind, regardless of the medium. So as long as you're engaging your students, as long as you're meeting them where they are and bringing them over that bridge to greater understanding of the world and a happiness that comes with being able to navigate a world full of information and still retain some sense of yourself, then you have succeeded as a teacher. It's been a great privilege to meet with you all this evening, and thank you for your participation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Tom.
Here are some readings. I'll leave these up here for anyone who would like to access them. I assume these are hot links. Is that correct, Shireen?
Yes.
Good.
And we will also will be posting the presentation on the community portal, so the participant will have access to the presentation.
Okay.
Yes, it is available on the link. True.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again.
Many thanks.